Today, I would like to share with you about a topic that this one is pretty far down the rabbit hole. But it's about two different ways of thinking that our human minds are capable of. And in the one, dualism, we create a very, very certain world for ourselves, and we become so immersed and lost in that created world that we forget that we have created the rules for the game. In the other, non-dualism, we see through the rules of the game, and we begin to perceive the world in a very different way. My name is Kenton Whitman, and I believe in you. This is a very simple and yet a very complex topic. And what I mean by that is that, in essence, if we can open up our perception to non-dual reality, we see that things are much simpler than we ever thought before. Many of the big questions, what is the meaning of it all? Why am I here? All these things begin to take on a clarity that is very, very simple. On the other hand, right now, most of our minds are very captured in dualistic thought. And for the dualistic mind to shift to non-dual thought is very complex, because it will try as hard as it can to complicate things. It's what the dualistic mind is very good at. First, it's essential that we understand what dualism is. And if you have already explored non-dual thought, you might find that I'm taking a very superficial approach in this video. But this is for people that really haven't explored it yet, and I hope to make it very clear and give an entrance into this new way of thinking that is available to anybody. Sometimes I write the word dualism like this, dualism. And that's a little wordplay in English. Dual means two, but duel is a fight, where two people often will face off against each other, sometimes to the death. And the reason that I'll use that wordplay is because dualism, for us to understand it, dualism creates duels. In fact, I would credit dualistic thought with the current state of the world. It's why we have wars. It's why we have so many divorces. It's why so many of us have so much anxiety and fear and frustration in our lives. Dualistic thought sees very clearly that there are multiple things in the world. And I'm going to simplify this into two things. So it sees, for instance, that there's me here and there's you watching this. We are very clearly separate creatures, according to dualistic thought. And this dualistic thought we also sometimes equate with rationality, though I would argue that it's actually very irrational. Still, it is going to jump in and try to defend itself very, very strongly. So when it has a concept such as I'm here, you're over there, and we are separate entities, it will not want to budge at all. As I start to divide up the world, and I believe this happens very early in life, because if you consider an infant might look around and there's not a lot of differentiation. Wall moves into ceiling, but it's just one thing. But eventually that infant picks out mama, and then that infant picks out another word, another word, another word. And these words they attach on to these things in the world that formerly were one thing. So, I look over here, I'm taught that this is the wall, that's the ceiling. Formerly they were one thing, now they've become two separate things. And this division of the world, if you think about it, it keeps going and going as we get older until the point that you or I, we can literally look around us in the world and there is nothing that we don't have a name for. Now, it might be that we look at the dust on our desk and we just say dust, and that's a very general term. If we look with a microscope, we would see that that word dust actually is a word for dead cells and little carcasses of tiny little insects and all kinds of lint from clothes. But still, we have a word for it. And what that means is that when I, as an adult, look around myself, my mind can crystallize everything into a word. And when I create a word, notice that I create a concept to go with it. And this is a very important part to understand what dualism is. So, I look at that dust, I glance over it, I say, that's dust. It's a concept. I'm not really seeing the dust. If I would take the time to explore it, I would see that it's this wondrous, wasteland of all kinds of things going on. Not just all the dead stuff, but there's little living things in there that are eating the dead stuff. It's a community. But my mind just says dust. And usually, along with that thing, my mind also attaches a meaning for that concept. So dust is something to be wiped up. There, I have created the concept, there's an action to go with it, things feel very, very clear, but I'm missing out on a big part of the world because I'm never going to question what that dust is. I'm never going to get out a microscope and look and say, what is this really? It's not just dust we do this with, it's people too. So I have a choice. I can look at my wife, Rebecca, and I can look and I can say, Rebecca. I give her a name, and then I fit a concept around her. There's some expected behaviors. I know that she in general is kind and thoughtful and very helpful around the house, great with the kids. And so I have this concept about her. And then I have my actions that go with that concept. So I have very kind of habitual ways of interacting with her. Now, when that happens, I'm not really seeing her. I'm seeing my concept of her. And my interactions are less with the actual Rebecca and more with my concept of her. It's also very easy for me to become frustrated with her because she is, in reality, an organic being that's changing and shifting all the time. But because I have my expectations of her, here's my idea of Rebecca, here's the reality, the organic, shifting being. Very often, those are not going to match up. And when they don't, I'm going to become frustrated or angry with her because she is not matching my expectations. And of course, I cannot be angry with her unless my expectations of her or my idea of her does not correlate with her actions. Hopefully now we're beginning to see, with the example of the dust and the example of Rebecca, how dualistic thought works. It divides up the world into different things, and it creates a concept around each of those things, and it creates expected actions that go with those concepts. And it fails to see the actual reality that's there. So what happens is then, when there's two things, and I've divided the world into me and another thing, those two things, they're going to interact. And in interacting and having a relationship, sometimes they're going to get along and sometimes they're not. And what we see is that when they don't get along, our life falls into frustration, anxiety, anger. Often in today's world, and for a long time in human history, violence. I do not believe this is necessary. And the key to making the shift is that, first of all, inside of ourselves, we shift away from dualism into more non-dual thought. And when we do this, we're going to create a different environment inside of ourselves that then reaches out to touch the people around us. Because we will not be generating the same amount of conflict in ourselves. We will not be generating conflict in the world around us in the same way that we were before. Non-dual thought, to put it simply, sees the world as a direct perception outside of our concepts. Now, that's not quite true, because non-dual thought is not going to make any divisions at all. And what that means, if we take it deep enough, is that it's even going to incorporate dualism. Because if it separates itself out from dualism, it's created a division. So for non-dualism to be pure, it has to intake everything. But for right now, all we have to realize is that I can look at this tree and I can see my concept of tree, or I can have a direct perception of this. Now, as soon as I say tree, my mind's going to probably jump and crystallize, right, into that dualistic thought. So part of this is starting to question some of those lines that we've drawn. I'm going to try to question a line that most of us are drawing right now. And that's between you and me. And so it's very clear that, to that dualistic mind again, that I'm over here on this side of the camera, you're over there on that side of the camera, and we might be half a world apart. We'll never meet in person. We are clearly separate entities. Yet, there's another way of thinking of this. And if we can realize that that dualistic concept that I just put forth, that we're separate, that's just a concept. I know this is a big jump, because it wants to go, no, that's reality, that's reality. But entertain for a moment that that's just a concept. And we might see that we could just as viably consider ourselves to be one being. And the truth of the matter is that because of you, I am out here filming this video. I'm thinking about these things, processing them. That brings those ideas deeper into my being, and it changes who I am. My toes are getting cold, my hands are getting cold because it's a very chilly day today. That's affecting my physiology. It's going to make me grow a little bit more brown fat and create some more mitochondria, and it's probably going to be very healthy for me. This would not be happening if you were not part of this in the same way. This video and the words that I'm sharing are going into your mind, and you probably know any experience that you have is going to change and alter your being. So in this case, those words are being heard by you, and that's changing your mindscape in a way that everything that comes after is going to be subtly changed. Now these changes may be very, very small. And notice that I can just as easily jump in, get my dualistic mind in here and say, okay, sure, we affect each other, but we're still very clearly two different people. And here is where words are not going to work very well for me. But I'm going to ask you to just feel this for a moment. That the dualistic mind is just making up a concept that you and I are separate entities. And that concept holds no more reality than the idea that actually all of humanity, let's say, is one entity. And that here, our interaction is not two different things interacting or relating with each other, but it's one thing that's moving together, for lack of better words. In a way, we might imagine a body, so a human body. And inside of it, there are organs and cells. And I can say, this is the heart, right? It's a separate thing from the liver. Yet if I pull that heart out, I'm going to find that it's actually attached through veins to the rest of the body. To take it out, I have to cut. And in fact, I would find that if I followed those veins, that it's attached to the liver. It becomes one thing with the liver. In our world, we've been thinking very dualistically for a long time. Makes very much sense. The heart and the liver, they are separate things. But when I pull it out, I see that it's messier than that. It's more organic than that. It's attached. The heart is attached to veins, arteries that go through my fingers, into my brain, everywhere, to my toes. I hope that this is starting to trigger something. Because what really needs to happen for us to see the world in a non-dual way is that something is triggered. And what is really happening when that trigger gets thrown is that we, remember when we were little kids and we started to learn wall, ceiling, and we created this world of concepts around us. And as we created that world of concepts around us, at some point we forgot that we had done this. Because nobody along the way was saying, this is a wall, but there's actually no difference. This is a social convention. I mean, we could easily say, this is a room. We don't need a word for wall or ceiling. But we've chosen to say, this is wall, this is ceiling. In most houses, there's a 90 degree that makes a very apparent line until we would look up closely. The closer we would look with a microscope, or in a house that had a curve between those, we would say, there's really no distinct line here between wall and ceiling. Night and day. There's night, very clear that it's different than day. But when we try to find that line, and we go out and we watch dusk settle, there's no clear line. The sun sets, but still, it's very, very light. All these things in life are these organic shifts, these organic beings. And when we can trigger that, when we can suddenly remember that we created all these concepts, and that now we're playing a big game where we believe those concepts to be real, then all of a sudden that trigger can be thrown, and we can remember, and suddenly we start to see, wow, the world is not actually made up of these concepts. These are just something that I've been creating in my head, and then I've been living according to those concepts. The world that reveals itself outside of our concepts is wondrous. In fact, if we look around us, I would say that when we are looking with dualistic thought, 99% of the world is missed. Because all we see when we look at a person is we see our concept. In that concept, it's very two-dimensional. It's very flat. The reality of that person is amazing. And when I can interact with a person as an organic being, when I can perceive them more directly, they are mind-blowingly wondrous. There's expressions going on, there's body language and movement, there's these funny sounds that they're making that I can interpret as words, and then I can form concepts out of that, and we can trade concepts back and forth. So here's the thing. If you have ever explored non-dualism, or you get interested in it now, and you start exploring some non-dual forms, you're going to see people arguing about all kinds of things. You're going to see people arguing about, well, you said this and you said this. And what they're trying to do often is to not use concepts. But here's the thing. If we are going to speak, we're going to be using concepts. Because our language, look at how beautifully we've created this game. Our language, every single word divides things up. There is no word we have that does not try to extract out a concept from the rest of the world. I sit here. Okay, so now I've created this concept of me. Sit, which is an action that I've separated out from the rest of the actions around me. Here, and I've separated out this little spot from the rest of the world. But when I stand here, or I sit here, and I look at here, where's the line between here and somewhere else? There's no line. The world just keeps going. It's like a river. And I say, oh, this is the Mississippi River, and this is the St. Croix River, and this is the Atlantic Ocean. But those rivers, they're all flowing into each other and into the ocean. They're part of this water that goes around the whole world and never stops. Oceans, an even better example. We have the Atlantic Ocean, the Pacific Ocean, the Indian Ocean, the Arctic Ocean. The Pacific Ocean is not the Atlantic Ocean, correct? That's what dualistic thought says. Now, look on a map. Look on a globe. Look at the Atlantic Ocean, and look at the Pacific Ocean. And just take a look at things and say, oh, where's the line? Find the line. This, my friends, is the entrance into a new world. And a lot of this channel, a lot of the videos that I'm going to be putting out here are going to be utilizing this method of thought in some way. So if you've taken the time to watch this video and it starts a little bit of exploration for you, it's a wonderful thing because there is so much world waiting for us outside of our concepts. Again, sometimes it's just going to trigger. It's just going to happen. And you're suddenly going to see through the veil a little bit. And usually we'll see through the veil, and then later we'll see through the veil a little bit more. And here's one just little word to take with you as you start this journey. And that is never let your mind rest. Some people, when they talk about this, they're using words like enlightenment. And when we use words like that, our ego, me, I, wants to grab onto that. It wants to be enlightened. It wants to have this treasure. And so it's going to stop at some point. going to say, I'm there, I figured this out. And it's not going to look anymore. It's going to try its best to ignore where concepts are still fooling it. So as you go down this road, if you want to explore it, leave no concept unturned. When your mind settles on something and says, I've got it, look very carefully and see, do I have it, or is my mind settling on an idea or a concept? And probably we'll find over and over and over again that our mind is really settling. And this will be an unfolding journey as the world reveals itself to us more and more and more, as we unravel these concepts and start to see them for what they are. Please, if you have explored non-dualism, if you've thought about dualistic thought, if this video triggered any thoughts or ideas or realizations, share in the comments below. We can all learn from each other's insight and wisdom. Thank you for watching, my friends. We'll talk with you soon. These videos cannot happen without you. Please consider becoming a patron on Patreon and helping me to make these videos a reality. Thank you.